Really amazing, doesn't it, huh? Who believes it? They told me, and I'm not down. Okay, the joke's on you, everybody. Okay, this is just an opening, right? There is no such instrument. This was an action that عملت قبل ال ADA مع واحد اسمه أشرف on the Roots group on Facebook. He just wanted to impress people and make everybody dream. But the question is, what of these characteristics is reality and what isn't? ايه الحاجات اللي انا هشوفها هنا ممكن تبقى موجودة في الفايلز and maybe not. So the process of this lecture, I'm going to go through the evolutions which the files and endodontic instrumentation has gone through in the last 150 years, with a special concentration in the last 10 years. So the first evolution. In the 1800s, we had rotary instruments. أيوة, they were rudimentary. كنا بنستعملهم نعمل بيهم cavities, normal conservative cavities, not for endodontics. And in the mid-1800s, واحد اسمه William Rowlands started designing a rotary handpiece for endodontic use, specifically for endodontic use. So what we saw was the burrs and the stones getting longer so that they can be used inside the canal. So this is the first evolution. The use of rotary instrumentation inside the canal is not something new from the 1990s. It's been around since 1800s. So it used to look like something like this. You see, it's a very, very rudimentary handpiece, but this is what it used to look like. Similar. تطور الطبيعي لحاجة ساعة. You had a burr, now you have a gates. A burr with a long shank. Same thing. Okay, so the first evolution was to actually use rotary instrumentation inside the canal. طبعا وقتها in the early 1800s, the technology of these instruments, the sizes, the reliability was very low. The instruments used to fracture, they used to damage. But it was since then that we began thinking about using rotary instrumentation inside the canals. The second evolution, very important evolution. 1905, 1915. What we use every day today, what you use every day today, I don't use them, but you use them. You use hand files, K-files, K-reamers. This was the next evolution. It's one thing to have an instrument which you can prepare from the tip, it's end cutting, and cut into the canal. It's another thing to have an instrument which can cut along the whole length of the canal. So the next evolution was very simple. I needed an instrument which could cut along the whole length of the canal. And they began to design the K-file and the K-reamer. The doldrums. من أول 1900s to the end of the 1900s. The doldrums دي كلمة تعني stagnation. Nothing much. بعد ال K-files وال K-reamers الدنيا قاعدة زي ما هي more or less. A lot of other companies حاولوا يعملوا designs لcontra hand pieces so that they could use them to prepare the canals. منهم they had in and out motion, منهم had rotary motion, but they were not doing so well, not because the idea of automation was bad, but المشكلة كانت كلها تكمن to the instruments being used in these handpieces. They were rigid and aggressive. One to be noted was reciprocation. If everybody is familiar with reciprocation, everybody thinks reciprocation is something new, something of 2011 and 2012. The first reciprocating handpiece was designed in 1964, so it's not really something new. It's just being reinvented again. Just like rotary instrumentation, it's not something new. It's being reinvented again. The third evolution, night eye. Who doesn't know night eye? حتى اللي ما بيستعملوش, he knows it. It's nickel titanium, super elastic. Research in 1988 proved that it was more acceptable in use in the canals, more flexible and more resistant to fracture. And this was the third evolution. This was a big evolution because we had designed the K-file in 1905 and the next evolution was nearly 100 years later in 1988. فرق كبير جدا بين تغيير لتغيير. But this was a big one. Now what is night eye? It was developed in the United States by William Buehler. He was a scientist working for the US Army. Has nothing to do with dentistry. It was introduced into dentistry in 1972 in orthodontics, and احنا كاندodontists it got introduced in 1988. What is it made out of? Nickel and titanium and شوية alloys تانيين, nickel, titanium and cobalt. These are the current alloys. They differ from one company to the other, but basically they're nearly 50-50. Nickel and 50 titanium plus or minus 5. Now, we're going to go a little bit into the science. Nickel titanium exists in two forms. حاجة اسمها austenite وحاجة اسمها martensite. Each one has different properties. Most of the rotary systems that you use today on the market are austenite based. The more recent ones are martensitic in nature. What's the difference? It's very simple. One of them exhibits a shape memory effect, and the other one exhibits superelasticity. Now I'll start with shape memory. Shape memory is the ability of a material to be bent, and then after applying heat, it comes back into the same form that it was in before it was bent. This is called shape memory. Now, with shape memory, it's a big problem inside the root canals because if your instrument bends and doesn't unbend, it's not going to go in and out very easily from the canal. But it needs a degree of rigidity. This is an example, this is an internet video of a super elastic wire, or sorry, a shape memory wire. The person bent the wire, and then he's going to put it in hot water, and the wire goes back to its original form. That's shape memory. That's not super elasticity. Okay, so martenistic alloys are shape memory, have shape memory, while super elastic alloys are the ones which we use. Super elasticity means that the instrument is very, very flexible. When you bend it, it gets bent, and then when you leave it, it has a restoring force. That means it goes back to its original form without any application of heat. Now, super elasticity is very useful for endodontics because we're dealing with curved canals. But on the other hand, it has a restoring force. And anybody knows who's used any rotary systems is that when you place the system in the canal for a very long time, it begins to try and restore itself. So it will open and prepare on the outer side of the curve, not on the inner side, resulting in ledging. So although it's useful, yet it's problematic at the same time. So, a tale of two evolutions. What happened? We had, in the early 1900s, rotary instrumentation. And then in 1988, we had nickel titanium. So what happened? No new evolution happened, just a merge of the evolutions. You got nickel titanium and rotary instrumentation, rotary nickel titanium instruments. So this is how it happened. This is not a new evolution. The evolution happened in 1988 and before it in 1888, but not in 1998. So you have the first rotary night-eye instruments. They were the first trials. They had big problems. من ضمنهم that they were all radial landed and they were very aggressive. They used to break in the canals. We had a lot of problems with our first generation instruments. And a few years of testing, شركات عمالة تبيع وتشتري, and then we started seeing our second generation of instruments which were better suited for endodontics. And these are the instruments which you may be using now, like Revo S, Pro Taper, K3. These are the instruments which survived the first generation of endodontic instruments, because the first generation, most of them don't exist now because they just don't work as effectively. They are not as effective as these instruments. So if you're working endodontics in 2015, you should be working at least with one of these, at least. Okay, so, and then the design features of the second generation instruments were very interesting. What we saw was all the manufacturers were trying to reduce the number of the instruments in the sequences, because it was very attractive for a dentist to be able to finish these preparations in a very quick amount of time, in short amount of time, like 3 file systems, 4 file systems. And what we're seeing sequentially is that the number of files in the systems are reducing. So you've got 2 file systems and even you've got 1 file systems now. In 2008, we started seeing some improved nickel titanium. When I was discussing nickel titanium, I said there were shape memory alloys and there were super elastic alloys. لحد 2007, all the alloys were super elastic in nature, austenitic. But زي ما قلنا, it had the problem that there was a restoring force. And this was bothering some of the clinicians, so they started playing around with the alloy, mixing it away, and making it partially martinistic, having the shape memory effect. So you have some instruments which would go into the canal and remain partially curved. These were the altered nickel titanium or heat-treated nickel titanium alloys. Examples, you may have tried them: ProTaper Gold, M2, Twisted, GTX, Highflex, CM, and EDM. All these are altered nickel titanium alloys. And you'll be seeing within the next maybe 5 to 10 years, most of these companies shifting to this alloy because it doesn't make sense to use a weaker alloy. So you have these stronger alloys which will resist fracture more. When you have alloys which resist fracture, you are able to reduce the number of files in the sequence, because you don't need to estimate in preparation on 3 or 4 files because you can all pack it on one file. This is why you'll find most of the one-file systems are made out of much stronger nickel titanium alloy. So in 2008, things have been much the same since the 2000, where we got introduced to the second generation of instruments. And in 2008, the fourth evolution in endodontic instrumentation. We started seeing Ghassan Yared from Canada, Toronto University. He published a paper where he described the preparation of a canal using one file, and then the race began. Today, all the companies were trying to produce a system which could prepare the canal using one file, but this was used in reciprocation. يعني فاكرين 1964 Micromega, the gyromatic handpiece, it was in reciprocation. And again, reciprocation coming up. But the evolution here is not the reciprocation, it is the fact that you are preparing in what? One file. So it's a tale of two evolutions. We're combining the reduced number of instruments with the motion, and now you're getting a new evolution, which is single file instrumentation in reciprocation. So it's one file used in reciprocation. Now, if anybody's not familiar with the reciprocation, I'm just going to very quickly explain. In 1964, the reciprocation was what we call unbalanced reciprocation. Yani it's a quarter turn this way and a quarter turn back. ربع دايرة, ربع دايرة. So it's called balanced. The instrument does not advance into the canal. Now in 2015, it's called unbalanced reciprocation. The instrument rotates 150 and then backwards 50 or 30, 150, 30, 150, 30. So in about 3 cycles, the instrument will have rotated a complete rotation in the canal, but in 3 cycles of reciprocation. Now this is very important because what it does is it prevents the instrument from reaching its torsional limit of fracture. So the instrument will never be abused because it just keeps on unwinding out of the canal. It never twists a complete turn. And this is why reciprocation is so attractive. In the next few years, we're going to be seeing more of this reciprocation, I expect, being introduced from different companies. So what is the advantages of a one-file system? The obvious. They are disposable, they are single-use up till now. But you don't have to transfer infection, you speed up your preparation process, it's less complicated, full of advantages. That's why people are so attractive. Time saving. كل الكلام ده بيخلي الواحد, oh, that's interesting. If I could buy a single file system, I'll do it. Right, so examples, you have wave 1, you have the reciproc. These are 2 different types of single file reciprocating instruments. And they're doing just fine. There's a lot of research in the last 4 or 5 years comparing both.